This Green Deal update has been taken from a presentation given by Chris Broadbent during BRE's INSITE 11 event in early October 2011. It uses a live recording, so you will find some background noise. If you weren't able to join us at INSITE, we hope you will find this update useful.
But here we are. Let's start about Green Deal. This is where, to some extent, it started. Back in 2009, Grant Shapps was here and he announced his programme there. This is the Conservative Party in opposition about pay as you save, which essentially became Green Deal. And what he said was this: imagine if you could walk into your local favourite store, buy some clothes, do your weekly shop, then at the checkout, as you hand over your club card, the checkout cashier offers you the proposal of permanently lower utility bills. Nothing to pay now or later, home retrofitted, all you notice is the costs less to heat and power the building. And that was the beginning. It hasn't really changed from that. But why? Why do we need to do anything at all? Well, this is it really. 74% of our properties are older than 1975. Homes produce 23% of UK greenhouse gas emissions. A big issue. We've been looking at new houses recently. We've been looking at zero carbon by 2016. But actually, the big problem is our existing housing stock. We've got the targets of 34% reductions by 2020, 80% by 2050. We've got household energy bills creeping up. I got a letter from my energy supplier the other day, I expect you all did too, and it's gone up again. So that's the big issues that we face. So what's the Green Deal trying to do? Well, it's a series of packages of energy efficiency measures, broadly up to £10,000 in value, at no upfront cost, provided by a Green Deal provider for a homeowner to improve their home, and for that to be paid back over an agreed period of time through reductions in their energy bills. There are two aspects of this that are called the golden rule, which you may have heard being talked about. One is the fact that the payback period, be it 20, 25 years or whatever, the payback period mustn't be longer than the life of the measures being installed. So you don't want things breaking down and becoming obsolete whilst still there's a Green Deal charge on the property. That's one aspect of the golden rule, or less than the likely energy bill savings, so that at the beginning of this all, your bills will be no more than they have been, but you will be paying back this money that's been provided to improve your house. And at the end of the period of time, when that's all paid off, then you will see more substantial improvements in savings, because you won't then be paying back this money. The energy supplier is the conduit for all this. The householder is not the owner of the loan, the house is, so the loan is fixed on the energy meter in the property, and it's not a conventional loan in that respect, so the householder is not liable for that capital sum. It is attached to the house and transfers to the new owner when that should happen. And it will apply to the non-domestic commercial buildings as well. So this is the process, really, in simple terms. Marketing and coordination. Remember, this is a market-driven initiative. It's not a legislative programme that means you've got to do it, although I'll come back to that in a moment. It is a market-driven programme. So marketing will be key to this, to encourage, to persuade, to show consumers that this is a beneficial programme to take advantage of. And then we've got the survey, which is, as I've said, important, because this is where the house is looked at. This is where the measures that might be appropriate are identified. This is where the consumer is told of all the issues that relate to that installation in their house, what they might save, what issues there might be in installation, and so on. Finance, that is key, and this is a commercially arranged finance. We've talked about this consortium that's there, the Green Investment Bank and so on. Finance, followed by the installation, and then a programme of repayments through the life of the Green Deal charge. And maybe some follow-up to see how things are going for the Green Deal provider to keep in touch with his customers. And this is the sort of cash flow where, again, we've got the finance provider here funding the Green Deal provider, who may upfront pay for installation and assessment in advance of the work being done, and installation once it's been agreed and signed off, and then through the bills attached to the meter, money is paid back in instalments through the energy supplier to the finance provider. So that's the cash flow process that we're looking at for this. This is where it gets interesting, and this is the sort of structure that's been decided for Green Deal. And DEC at the top of the tree there, head of policy body. The oversight body doesn't exist yet. Its terms of reference are currently being determined. But essentially, it will manage the code of practice that you'll see just below there in green. It will manage the registers of advisors, the registers of installers. It will manage product approval for those products and measures that are under Green Deal. It will manage and issue the Green Deal mark, because there will be a little mark that says this is a Green Deal approved product, service, installation, and so on. Now this is going to go out for tender in November. There'll be an overdue tender process starting in November, and they're going to appoint, as I understand it, this oversight body in June of next year, 2012. Now under the oversight body we've got the Green Deal Code of Practice, which is quite central and key to all of this, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And either side of that we've got two things. One here is a British Standards Institution publicly available specification past 2030, which is in draft form and out for consultation at the moment, that describes the process of the installer and how the installer needs to meet certain standards. And this is 175 pages of delightful documentation which you'd love to read at some point. There's probably 12 key pages at the beginning, but loads of appendices that address every different aspect of what might become a Green Deal installation. There's then an advisor standard, and this is being developed again at the moment, and this is the standard that the Green Deal advisors will work to as to how they will deliver advice and what controls, what quality assurance, what standards, what qualifications they will need to have. And both of those documents are being developed. To the right-hand side, we've got the UCAS accrediting standards. Now, UCAS is the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, and the important thing here is that they are in charge of the quality end of this service. At the moment, if you have anything to do with energy performance certificates, you realise that the Department of Communities and Local Government manage the quality assurance of that role, and it's not their thing, really, if one's polite. And I think it's rather better to get somebody involved who does quality, really. And so the UCAS are a body that will accredit certification bodies who will then in turn deliver a quality assurance process for whatever it is that's being done. So UCAS will be working under a system called ISO 45011, which is the management system standard for product certification, and that's the one that's being applied. So the rules that the advisor will work to and the installer will work to will be their specific rules under this box, plus the overall accreditation scheme standards under UCAT. And that together defines the service they will deliver, defines the quality standards they work to, and defines the complaints process and all the stuff that follows from delivering a quality service. Below that we've got certification bodies, and so there'll be bodies that certificate installers and bodies that certificate advisors, and they will be, well, BRE is intending to be one of those. We already certificate energy assessors, and so we're intending also to do the same for Green Deal advisors as well. So how can the advisor be impartial? Well, there's two stages to the process of advice, really. The first is the assessor going in, producing an EPC, essentially the fabric assessment of the property, also looking at the occupational issues of that house. How is it used? How many people live in it? And how do they operate their systems in the house? And then a discussion of the outcomes of the report, the likely suitability for Green Deal, what measures would be appropriate, and a piece of advice which is generic. It doesn't, at this stage, deal with specific products by name or cost. It deals with generic measures that would be appropriate in the circumstances. And it would probably do a quick assessment of the golden rule based on typical prices to make sure that it would be a viable proposition to meet the golden rule. Then we've got this red dotted line here, which is the point at which the impartial assessment stops. At that point, the customer could say, take their report and go and take it to 3 Green Deal providers and get alternative quotes on that report from each of the 3, and then decide which one to go for. But it is possible for the assessor who is impartial up to the red line, for that person to be tied to a particular Green Deal provider. And you could then say, that's my impartial report, that's as far as you need to go, but would you like me to give you a quote for the Green Deal provider that I represent? At that point, if the customer is happy with that, they can act for the Green Deal provider that they're associated with to look at particular products that meet what was originally arrived at in the impartial bit, and therefore be able to price it properly, and knowing the real products are being used, then absolutely calculate whether the golden rule is met or not. And if the customer wants to go ahead with that, then they can do so. But at any time, they can go back and get another quote from somebody else if they should wish to. So here we have an impartial report based on the fabric, based on occupancy issues, by a trusted advisor who does have the option to be tied to a provider, but essentially is independent. Robust advice based on the EPC, but with an improved methodology, which I'll come back to in a moment. Portable advice, you can shop around, take it somewhere else, look at different offers that might be around in the marketplace. And again, qualified, accredited advice, fit for purpose, and so on. So how are we developing the programme for Green Deal advisors? How will those qualifications work? Well, the Code of Practice we talked about earlier on, and in parallel with that, the National Occupational Standards are being developed for Green Deal advisors and for energy assessors, because those are being revised as well to meet the upskilling standards that are being talked about. So those National Occupational Standards are being drafted at the moment. They're in consultation as we speak. I think the consultation for the Green Deal advisor ones ends, it's just been extended, extends out to the 14th of October. Consultation for the Energy Performance Certificate, National Occupational Standard, closed on Friday. Certification of Green Deal advisors' services is essential, and so there's a draft specification being developed. This is the one that I mentioned earlier on the left-hand side of that chart. That's expected to be ready end of September, but I do notice it's the 3rd of October. We don't seem to have seen it yet. And so that's on its way, and we hopefully during the middle of this month we'll see another draft of that, which hopefully will be somewhere near the mark. Upskilling of domestic energy assessors is a big task, and we're being told that these National Occupational Standards will lead to revised qualifications by January. So we then have between January and April for energy assessors to go through upskilling process, delivered through CPD, but also, I think, well, this isn't completely determined, centrally examined. So a central exam for energy assessors to do to show that they've met the standard required to continue practicing as energy assessors, but waiting for government just to confirm that. And then starting in April, probably maybe March, qualifications will be available for Green Deal advisors, people qualified for this new role. This business of using UCAS to quality assure the process of these schemes is going to extend to energy certificates as well. So currently, Department of Communities and Local Government manage the QA process for energy assessors, and that's going to change over to a UCAS system under 45,011, like is being set up for Green Deal advisors from October 2013. So big changes there as well. So National Occupational Standards in consultation at the moment. Once that consultation is finished, they will finalise the NOS, convert those NOS clauses into what are called QCF units. They're units of qualification that sit on the qualification and credit framework. And then there'll be a series of rules of combination, which is the way in which you combine units from the QCS together to form a qualification. So the rules that will say it's this unit, this unit, this unit, this unit that makes the Green Deal advisor qualification. And so those will be developed following November and by mid-January. Asset Skills, who are doing this, are talking to awarding bodies to have these qualifications. I know they're talking to 3 awarding bodies. And the intention is that by March we'll have Green Deal advisor qualifications available to be taken. So from February, March, training could start before the qualifications are quite available. So February, March start. October 2012 is when the first Green Deal will happen. So there's a period of time there for Green Deal advisors to get themselves trained and qualified. We talked earlier on about changes to RD-SAP for Green Deal, and this is how this is going to work. That's an idea of how the new Energy Performance Certificate might look. We've got just one chart there rather than 2 at present, and a lot more focus on what savings might be if you improved your property. But the recommendations for the Golden Rule, the recommendations that will be taken forward, are based on the standard occupancy of the house. If you remember that the Energy Performance Certificate is based on standard occupancy, so it's not tailored to where your house is located or how many people live in it. It's based on typical values, and that's so that you can compare one house with another. And if you based it on the way one family lived in it compared to one old lady living in her house, if you just took those figures, you get quite widely different things that wouldn't allow you comparison. So the standardisation of the EPC allows home buyers to compare one house with another through the EPC and therefore influence their buying decision. So there will still be these recommendations for Green Deal based on standard occupancy. And think if it's a 25-year life, we could well find that several families will live in the house over that time, each having the Green Deal transferred to them, each with different lifestyles and different occupancies. And so this must be a Green Deal that works for everybody, and that's why it's based on the standard occupancy. However, it will take into account weather issues for that particular location, which the EPC currently doesn't. So the degree days will be part of that. There'll be additional recommendations added in to make sure that it's fully available for Green Deal issues, and that will be annually refreshed with any new products and services and new measures that might be relevant. Additional measures are being modelled within the EPC. There'll be an ability to deal with things room by room. This is the concept where somebody might just be doing up their kitchen, so they're ripping out the kitchen, so why not insulate solid walls on the inside at the same time? So have a Green Deal just for that bit. And so that new version of RDSAT will allow for the room by room assessments as well. There will be an occupancy assessment as well, and although that will not drive the recommendations, it will allow the customer to understand how their particular way of occupying the house, the number of people that are in it and so on, would affect their savings. And so the reality of the savings they might make is tempered a little bit by the occupancy assessment, although overall it's based on the standard occupancy. So we've then got the Green Deal Advice Report, which is made up of three things really. First, the EPC. So we've got the EPC that's in the Green Deal Advice Report. We've then got an occupancy assessment, which is looking at how that house is actually being used, looking at actual energy bills. And then we've got a wrapper that goes around those two, which gives a summary and an overview and a conclusion and what's next for the homeowners to take that forward. Okay, let's just move on. Just to say, the EPC Advisor tool, if ever any of you have used that, it's a way in which you can put the energy, the reference number of your energy performance certificate into a piece of software, and you can then play around with the recommendations and see what effect there would be on savings. That will be extended in scope to be compatible with the sorts of measures that would be available under Green Deal. SBEM, again, the SBEM will be the tool for EPCs, or is the tool for EPCs for commercial buildings, and it will continue to be modified now to meet the Golden Rule requirements. Just a few quick things about this really. The recommendation of the Golden Rule will actually be for the tailored circumstances of the actual building. So whereas with the domestic we were talking about the standardised building as the basis recommendations, for commercial it's the actual building and the actual way it's being used. Reasons for this is that commercial buildings are often used completely differently, and the likely period of payback is going to be linked more to lease periods than anything else. So the chances are that a Green Deal would not be running for longer than the occupation of a particular tenant. The calculations of savings would be based on actual energy data, so there'll be a link there to the display energy certificate, again relating back to bills. There'll be a what if calculator within SBEM which says what happens if I do this, what happens if I do that, how do the measures that I'm thinking of affect the performance of the building and the savings that might be achieved. And that's currently being designed and built, and we'll have some trials at the end of October of that tool, and the idea is to have it ready for launch in April next year. Timetable, this is where it gets fairly scary. Energy bills going through at the moment, as you'll know. Consultation on the details of the scheme is going through. Code of practice is being developed as we speak. Secondary legislation early next year. Early adopters, such as ourselves, getting involved with UCAS and others to start getting the certification processes in place. Green Deal providers beginning to get their processes in place in time for autumn 2012 when the first Green Deal will appear. So the challenge, it's all sorts of property, it's dwellings and it's non-dwellings, it's a financial product essentially at commercial rates, and there's risk and there's liability associated with those, but it's a slightly different format from a normal loan. The scope is being developed as we speak. There needs to be a coordinated programme, because the provider, the installer, the energy advisor, all of those guys need to work together to deliver this with the finance to give a whole package. And one of those bodies, the Green Deal provider, will have an overall point of responsibility to the customer for that delivery. So there'll be a single point of contact for the customer should anything go wrong through the Green Deal provider, who will then deal with whatever redress is needed and then knock it back down the line to other parties should that be necessary. It's market driven, so that really absolutely needs consumer confidence to make that happen, because it doesn't require consumers to go for this in order for this market to develop at all. Market promotion, we'll see that happening very shortly, and there needs to be some really clear messaging. We've all seen how complicated it is already, and how is that communicated clearly and effectively to those who want to take advantage of it. So all of those things depend on how Green Deal goes, how big it will be, how successful it will be, and we look forward to the next 12 months to see that happen. Opportunities all over the piece for that. Customers, really opportunities for all types of building owner to take advantage of this. Green Deal providers, quite a big business opportunity here to take advantage of. Assessors, installers, suppliers. Chris Hume has talked about his green army of people. All of those guys are going to be his green army of people delivering energy saving improvements to properties to try and hit these targets that we talked about at the beginning that we're trying to get to for reducing CO2 emissions by those dates. A lot of stuff is on DEC's website, so do have a look there if you want to find out more. You'll find minutes of the various working groups posted there, so you can look at those. You'll find these two documents, for example, there, which describe the Green Deal. One on the left gives a good summary of Green Deal. One on the right talks about the energy savings and how those work. So it's worth having a look at those. And if you're interested in this, just have a dig through dec.gov.uk and find out quite a lot more.
We will be providing regular Green Deal information and updates in the coming months. You will find these by visiting www.bre.co.uk/Green Deal. Also, make sure you are registered to receive our regular e-news at www.bre.co.uk/training. Thank you for watching this presentation.